It started with a single letter, a plain white envelope that landed on the desk of the San Francisco Chronicle in August 1969. No one in that newsroom could have imagined that inside lay the first clue to one of the most terrifying and enduring mysteries in American crime history. The envelope was addressed in careful, deliberate handwriting. The return address simply said the Zodiac. When the editor slit the top open and pulled out the pages, the room went still. Each page contained strange symbols, circles, slashes, and lines, a cipher that seemed to come from another world. And above those symbols were the words, "This is the Zodiac speaking." It was the beginning of a reign of fear that would grip Northern California, a story where death was announced like a headline and terror was written in code. The first victims were young, innocent, and completely unaware that they were about to become part of history. Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday, both teenagers, were shot on a quiet lover's lane in Benicia, California, in December 1968. The crime shocked the small community. There was no robbery, no clear motive, just execution-style precision. 7 months later, another couple was attacked near Blue Rock Springs Park. This time, one survived. Darlene Ferrin was shot multiple times and killed instantly. Her passenger, Michael Mago, was seriously wounded but lived to describe the killer, a heavy-set man, about 5 feet 8 inches, wearing dark clothing and a flashlight strapped to a gun. Just days later, 3 Bay Area newspapers, the Chronicle, Examiner, and Vallejo Times-Herald, received nearly identical letters. Each one demanded to print a cipher on the front page, threatening that if they didn't, more people would die. The editors had no choice. By August 2, 1969, the Zodiac had introduced himself to the world. That night, families sat glued to their televisions, listening as anchors read excerpts of the bizarre message. Some saw it as a hoax. Others felt an uneasy chill, the feeling that this was real, that someone out there was watching. Law enforcement scrambled to respond. The Vallejo Police Department called in cryptographers from all over the country, but it was an ordinary high school teacher and his wife who would make the first breakthrough. Donald and Betty Harden sat at their kitchen table for days, trying to make sense of the symbols. Then Betty noticed a pattern, the repeated appearance of the word kill. Piece by piece, they cracked it. The message was chilling: "I like killing people because it is so much fun." The Zodiac had revealed his motive, not money, not revenge, but pure pleasure in murder. It was the kind of sentence that made even hardened detectives go quiet. But this was only the beginning. Over the next few years, he would send dozens of letters and postcards, some containing new ciphers, others with pieces of bloody clothing as proof of his crimes. Each time he wrote, he seemed more confident, more mocking. The police were chasing a ghost. By October 1969, the Zodiac struck again. Paul Stein, a San Francisco taxi driver, picked up a fare at the intersection of Mason and Geary. The passenger directed him to Washington and Cherry Streets in the upscale Presidio Heights neighborhood. But when the cab stopped, the man pulled out a gun and shot Stein in the head. Children playing across the street witnessed the killer wipe the cab down before walking calmly away. One of them called the police. But a radio dispatcher made a critical error. They described the suspect as a black male adult instead of white. That mistake allowed the Zodiac to slip past responding officers, who likely crossed paths with him without realizing it. Minutes later, another letter arrived at the Chronicle, containing a piece of Stein's bloody shirt. The Zodiac wanted everyone to know he had done it. As the letters piled up, the investigation spread across multiple counties. The FBI, local police, and even military cryptographers joined forces. But every lead led to another dead end. Each cipher seemed unsolvable. Each clue contradicted the last. The media, meanwhile, turned the Zodiac into an icon of fear. His name dominated headlines, his symbol, a circle with a cross, appeared on front pages like a mark of death. He taunted the police publicly, writing, "School children make nice targets. I shall cruise around and pick off kiddies." The city was paralyzed. Parents kept their children home from school. Every strange face on the street seemed suspicious. But then, silence. After 1974, the letters stopped. The killer seemed to vanish as suddenly as he appeared. 4 decades, his unsolved ciphers haunted detectives and code breakers. The Z340, sent to the San Francisco Chronicle on November 8, 1969, was considered unbreakable. It was a grid of 340 characters, letters, triangles, circles, and other symbols arranged in a pattern no one could decipher. Cryptography experts from the CIA, NSA, and universities tried to break it. Each attempt failed. The cipher became a legend, a message from a killer who seemed to outwit everyone. Some theorized it was meaningless gibberish. Others believed it contained the Zodiac's true identity. Year after year, new books, movies, and documentaries kept the mystery alive. Amateur sleuths online analyzed handwriting, cross-referenced police reports, and debated suspects deep into the night. Yet the cipher remained untouched. Until one day, more than 50 years later, 3 ordinary men on 3 different continents decided to try again. It began quietly, without funding, without fame, just 3 men connected by obsession. David Aranchak, a computer programmer from Virginia, had been studying the Zodiac ciphers for more than a decade. To him, it wasn't just about solving a code. It was about understanding a mind that refused to be understood. On the other side of the world was Jarl van Eyck, a Belgian warehouse worker with a genius for pattern recognition. And in Australia, Sam Blake, a mathematician with an eye for cryptologic symmetry. None of them were professional investigators. Yet together, they formed an unlikely alliance, a digital trio united by one impossible puzzle. It started one late night in 2018. David had been reviewing old cipher texts, running them through pattern recognition software, when he noticed something, small inconsistencies that didn't fit traditional ciphers. The Zodiac's code wasn't random. It was deliberate chaos, built to mock the very systems meant to decode it. He reached out to Jarl and Sam. The 3 began collaborating through emails and encrypted chats, sending grids of characters, potential transpositions, and cipher keys back and forth across time zones. For months, they failed. Over and over, the computer spat out nonsense. But none of them could walk away. Late one night, Jarl decided to shift the cipher's grid, just one diagonal move, something no one had tried before. And then, something happened. Letters started to align. Phrases began to appear in fragments, not full sentences yet, but enough to feel like breathing life into a ghost. Hope you are having lots of fun. The phrase appeared out of nowhere, unmistakable. The room went cold. He shared the finding immediately. Within hours, all 3 men were on a group call, voices shaking. This could be it, Sam said, his Australian accent trembling through the static. It reads like him. For the next 48 hours, none of them slept. They adjusted patterns, cross-checked grammar, and ran thousands of combinations. Slowly, word by word, the Zodiac's long-buried message came to life. And after 51 years of silence, the cipher finally spoke. It read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. Which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. Because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise. So they are afraid of death. I am not. Because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death." The silence after the final line was deafening. This was it, the voice of the Zodiac after half a century, mocking death, laughing at investigators, and confirming what many had feared. He saw himself not as human, but as a god of chaos. David sat in stunned disbelief. He hit record and whispered into his microphone, "We solved it. After all these years, we actually solved it." But even as celebration spread across the online cryptography community, something darker lingered beneath the surface. The Zodiac's message revealed nothing about his identity. He had spoken, but only to say he would never be caught. Meanwhile, in Northern California, retired detectives watched the news with bittersweet awe. For decades, many of them had carried the Zodiac case like a wound that wouldn't close. Some had grown old waiting for a clue. Now, seeing the cipher decoded, they felt a strange mix of pride and pain. Detective Ken Narlow, who'd once chased the Zodiac trail through Vallejo and Napa County, called it a miracle wrapped in frustration. The message proved that the killer had indeed written it, but it also confirmed his ultimate cruelty, to leave everyone hanging on a riddle that led nowhere. Yet there were whispers, too, that maybe the code did contain clues, subtle word choices, deliberate spelling errors, strange capitalizations that hinted at a name hidden in plain sight. The deeper analysts went, the more chilling the message seemed. Paradise, spelled with a C, wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern, a word the Zodiac had carved on one of his infamous Halloween cards years earlier, arranged in a cross pattern with the words "by fire, by gun, by rope, by knife." It was his manifesto, his personal mythology. To him, death was currency. Murder was ritual. And even though his cipher was cracked, his identity remained sealed. In 2021, the FBI verified the decoding publicly. They confirmed that the message matched linguistic and stylistic patterns from Zodiac's previous letters, authentic, beyond doubt. The FBI issued a statement. The FBI is aware that a cipher attributed to the Zodiac Killer was recently solved by private citizens. The case remains open and unsolved. But behind the scenes, momentum was building. Because around the same time the cipher was cracked, new DNA analysis technology was being used to revisit old evidence, stamps, envelopes, and letters from the Zodiac archives. Scientists believed that one day, genetic genealogy, the same tool that caught the Golden State Killer, could finally unmask him. In a quiet lab in San Francisco, forensic analyst Laura Kim carefully examined one of the Zodiac's original envelopes under magnification. She'd been on the team analyzing trace DNA from decades-old letters, a near-impossible task, since most had been contaminated by handlers over the years. Still, she persisted. Each day, she scraped microscopic cells from the adhesive edge of stamps, trying to find genetic material that hadn't degraded. She had read the letters so many times she could recite them by heart. "This is the Zodiac speaking," she whispered under her breath, studying the fibers. One night, her screen flickered, a partial sequence appeared. Incomplete, but promising. She cross-referenced it against CODIS and other national databases. No direct match. But when she uploaded it to a genealogical database, something remarkable happened. A cluster match appeared. A distant relative. The system started drawing lines, connecting names, generations, and branches of family trees. The path led to one name. Not a stranger, not a random man, but someone who had already appeared in the Zodiac suspect files decades earlier. Gary Francis Post. And just like that, the case that haunted America for over half a century started to shift from theory to revelation. Post had lived in California, served in the Air Force, and reportedly resembled composite sketches of the Zodiac. He had died in 2018, quietly, in a small town near the Sierra Nevada mountains. His neighbors described him as controlling, eccentric, and sometimes violent. One former acquaintance claimed Post had once boasted about things he'd done that nobody would believe. Others dismissed it as paranoia. But when investigators looked deeper, patterns emerged: ballistic similarities, handwriting overlaps, and even cryptic references in his personal writings. It was far from definitive proof, but it was enough to reignite the fire. Still, for the families of the victims, it wasn't about theories or suspects. It was about faces, names, and lives stolen decades ago. And now, for the first time, they felt like maybe, just maybe, the shadows were finally lifting. The night the partial DNA match came in, the San Francisco field office was silent. A storm rolled outside, lightning flashing against the bay, and inside that quiet hum of machines and fluorescent light, Special Agent Laura Kim stared at the screen, frozen. Her heart raced. The match was faint, fragmented, but it was there. A name kept flashing across the genealogical link analysis, one she had seen before buried in old reports: Gary Francis Post. She whispered it to herself, tasting the strangeness of it. The man had been dead for years, cremated, forgotten. But his past wasn't. It was waiting. She opened the old case files, yellowed pages with his name scribbled among hundreds of suspects. Nothing had ever stuck. No evidence had ever placed him definitively at the scenes. But now, with this new DNA pathway, the possibility glimmered like the edge of a blade. She called her superior. "Sir, I think we have a lead." Hours later, a small task force gathered in a windowless conference room. Photos of Zodiac's letters lined the board. Diagrams of his ciphers. A grainy photo of Post from 1970. And on the far end of the table, a single note pinned above everything: "Zodiac, who are you?" Laura pointed to the DNA chart projected on the wall. "This match doesn't confirm identity. But it narrows our suspect pool to one family line. Gary Francis Post fits both the geographic and temporal profile. He was stationed near the Bay Area during the first killings. He had firearms training. And his handwriting," she tapped another slide. "It's eerily consistent." The room fell silent. Another agent leaned forward. "If this holds, we may be looking at the closest anyone's ever gotten to solving the Zodiac case." But not everyone agreed. The room divided quickly, between believers and skeptics. Some said the DNA was too degraded. Others said it was reckless to label a dead man without full confirmation. Still, the case moved forward. The next day, Laura drove to Groveland, California, the quiet town where Post had lived his last years. It was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Mountain air, pine trees, and silence. But when she arrived at his old home, the locals began to talk. "Yeah, Gary, he was odd, said an old mechanic leaning on his truck. Always locked up in that shed of his. Didn't like people looking at his stuff. Said he used to work for the government. Another woman, a former neighbor, spoke in whispers. He had scars all over his forehead, said they came from accidents in the war. But sometimes, when he got drunk, he'd start talking about the ones who deserved it. Laura looked around the dusty property, a small house, a broken mailbox, a shed padlocked shut. When she finally got a warrant to open it, the door creaked like it hadn't moved in years. Inside was chaos, old boxes, rusted tools, broken radios. But on the back wall, nailed into wooden planks, was something that froze everyone in place. A large board covered in yellowed newspaper clippings, articles about the Zodiac killings, printed letters, police sketches, even photos of coded notes that matched the original crime scenes. And in the center, handwritten in faded ink, "The game never ends." Laura's hands trembled as she took photos. Among the piles of debris, she found a small, weathered notebook. Inside were pages of numbers, cryptic symbols, and phrases eerily similar to Zodiac's earlier letters. The last entry read, "I can't stop seeing them. Faces in the dark. They whisper when it rains." For the first time in decades, something tangible had emerged. News leaked quickly. Within days, headlines screamed, "Zodiac Killer finally identified." Cable networks ran documentaries overnight. Online forums exploded with debates. Some hailed it as closure, others called it desperation. But deep inside the FBI, Laura knew the truth: it wasn't over. Because what she found next would change everything. Hidden in one of the envelopes sealed inside the notebook was a tiny scrap of paper. It contained coordinates, handwritten in trembling ink. When she mapped them, her pulse quickened. They pointed to a stretch of land in Vallejo, a wooded area near Lake Herman Road. The site of the Zodiac's first confirmed double homicide. 2 days later, Laura and her team stood in the dirt at dawn. The fog clung to the ground. Birds moved through the mist. They began digging where the coordinates led. 3 feet down, a small rusted box emerged. Inside were relics, 2 spent shell casings from a 9mm, a damaged wristwatch, and another folded note. The note read, "I came back to see if anyone cared. They never did." It wasn't signed. But the handwriting was unmistakable. The discovery reignited the case. Forensic comparison confirmed that the note's ink composition and pressure matched Zodiac's early letters almost perfectly. The watch was of the same brand and model once mentioned in his taunting correspondences. In the following weeks, genealogical triangulation confirmed what Laura had suspected. The DNA linked to Post's maternal line matched trace samples recovered from the envelope adhesive of one authentic Zodiac letter. It wasn't 100% proof, but in a world of cold cases, it was close enough to conviction in spirit. For the families of the victims, it was a quiet vindication. For the surviving investigators, it was the sound of a long-closed door finally creaking open. And for the world, it was a haunting reminder: monsters can die, but their echoes never do. Still, even as the headlines celebrated Zodiac identified, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something about the case remained unfinished. Late one evening, she returned to her office and played back an old recording, the decoded message from the cipher. "I am not afraid of the gas chamber." The words filled the room like a whisper from another world. She stared at the waveform on her monitor, jagged, hypnotic. And for a fleeting second, she imagined him still out there, watching, laughing through time. Maybe Gary Post was the Zodiac. Maybe he wasn't. But what mattered most wasn't who he was, it was why he did it. And that answer, she realized, might never be fully known. As investigators dug deeper into the cryptic trail left by the Zodiac, the case began to transcend the boundaries of police work. It became an obsession. Amateur code breakers, journalists, and even former detectives spent sleepless nights staring at symbols and ciphers, hoping to unlock the truth that had taunted the world for decades. One of those ciphers, known as the 340-character code, had resisted every effort to be decoded for over 50 years. Then, against all odds, a breakthrough came from an unexpected corner of the world. In late 2020, a trio of private citizens, David Aranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck, finally cracked the infamous 340 cipher. It wasn't done by luck, but by a careful blend of mathematics, linguistic intuition, and cutting-edge computer algorithms. When they submitted their findings to the FBI, the message was confirmed to be authentic. The Zodiac's words, now seen clearly for the first time, sent chills through everyone who read them. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. The arrogance. The mockery. The cold, emotionless confidence that had defined the Zodiac Killer's tone was suddenly alive again, decades after his last confirmed attack. The message didn't reveal his identity. It didn't explain his motive. But it confirmed something far darker, that the Zodiac never feared death, and that his crimes were fueled not by vengeance or passion, but by pure psychological control. He wanted attention, fear, and immortality through mystery. And now, he had achieved all three. The decoding reignited public interest in the case. Forensic experts revisited old letters, testing for microscopic DNA traces. Handwriting analysts compared each curve, each inconsistent loop in the letters. Cryptographers scanned for hidden layers beyond the visible cipher. Every modern tool was brought into play, yet the man behind the letters remained a ghost. Each clue seemed to circle back into silence, as if the Zodiac himself had built a labyrinth designed to outlive every investigator who entered it. Some theorists pointed toward Arthur Lee Allen, a name that haunted the case for years. Allen had a disturbing fascination with ciphers, owned a wristwatch branded Zodiac, and lived in proximity to the attack sites. Yet despite years of scrutiny, no definitive evidence ever tied him to the crimes. DNA samples didn't match, fingerprints didn't align. Allen died in 1992, leaving behind questions that could never be answered. Others argued that the Zodiac wasn't one man, but possibly two individuals working together, explaining inconsistencies in writing styles and witness descriptions. Still, no theory stood unshaken. In 2021, a team of independent cold case investigators calling themselves the Case Breakers made headlines by claiming to have identified the Zodiac as Gary Francis Post, a house painter and military veteran who had died in 2018. They pointed to physical similarities, cryptic links between photos, and a trail of evidence suggesting Post's presence near several Zodiac-related sites. But the FBI quickly responded, stating that the case remained open and unsolved. Once again, the Zodiac slipped through the cracks of certainty, retreating into the fog of speculation. For the families of the victims, David Faraday, Betty Lou Jensen, Dolene Ferrin, Cecilia Shepard, and Paul Stein, the years had offered little comfort. Some of them spent their lives fighting to keep the case alive, appearing in documentaries and working with law enforcement to push for answers. Others, weary from decades of pain, preferred silence. Yet all shared the same wound, the pain of a story without closure. The Zodiac's terror didn't just end lives, it imprisoned survivors in a cycle of fear and unanswered questions. As technology advanced, new hope emerged. DNA genealogy, the same tool that identified the Golden State Killer, was applied to the Zodiac case. Tiny flakes of saliva sealed beneath an old stamp or envelope might finally reveal a name. Labs around the world competed silently, hoping to extract enough material to confirm what decades of detective work could not. And though results have been inconclusive so far, optimism lingers in the hearts of those who have dedicated their lives to uncovering the truth. Each breakthrough, each letter decoded, each story told brings humanity closer to the moment the Zodiac's mask is lifted. But what if the real answer isn't in the letters or the codes, but in understanding the psychology behind them? The Zodiac craved control. His ciphers weren't merely messages, they were puzzles designed to trap attention, to ensure his presence would echo forever in the human mind. In that sense, he achieved what he set out to do. Even now, over half a century later, the name Zodiac still provokes fascination, fear, and endless curiosity. Somewhere in San Francisco, the city that once trembled under his reign, a few of his letters remain locked in climate-controlled archives. Police officers who weren't even born during his time study them today, their gloved hands turning the fragile paper, wondering if the killer's DNA still clings to its surface. Street corners where his victims once fell are now quiet, lit by modern streetlights, but beneath the calm surface lies a ghost of that era, a reminder of a city's dark chapter that has never fully closed. And yet, for every horror the Zodiac inflicted, there also rose an army of truth-seekers, people who refused to let the darkness win. Their persistence, across generations, has kept the victims' memories alive. It's not just about finding a name anymore, it's about understanding how evil hides behind ordinary faces, how silence protects it, and how humanity's refusal to forget ensures that justice, even if delayed, will always have a voice. In the end, perhaps that's the legacy of the Zodiac case. Not the mystery he created, but the resilience he unintentionally inspired. Every cipher solved, every theory tested, every discussion rekindled on forums and documentaries keeps the light burning against the shadow he cast. Because in the world of unsolved crimes, time doesn't erase the truth, it only buries it deeper, waiting for someone brave enough to dig it out. And until that day comes, his words, once meant to mock, will serve as a reminder that even the darkest minds can never silence the pursuit of truth. Every mystery leaves behind a voice. And tonight, we've heard one that refuses to fade, the voice of fear, arrogance, and obsession. But also, the echo of resilience, determination, and justice waiting just beyond the coded silence. This is Mystery Files, Cold Case Investigations. And this was the Zodiac's unbroken code. As the night settles over San Francisco, the fog drifting like an old memory through the Golden Gate, one can almost feel the weight of the Zodiac's legacy still hanging in the air. It's not the murders alone that carved his name into history, it's the psychological imprint he left behind. The Zodiac didn't just terrorize a city, he changed how people looked at mystery itself. For the first time, fear became interactive. The killer turned newspapers into his stage, letters into performances, and an entire population into his unwilling audience. Even after the ciphers were decoded, something unsettling lingered, the realization that the Zodiac wanted us to keep playing his game. Every time a new clue emerged, every time an old symbol was re-examined, his ghost seemed to grin from the shadows, pleased that we still hadn't stopped looking. It wasn't just about solving who he was, it was about refusing to let him win by being forgotten. In recent years, technology has become the new detective. Advanced AI analysis now dissects patterns in his letters, examining inconsistencies that human eyes might miss. Voice reconstruction programs try to simulate how he might have sounded based on linguistic patterns and regional phrasing. Even the paper fibers and ink have been studied, using modern forensics that didn't exist half a century ago. Every test brings us a step closer, or so it seems. But in the Zodiac case, every answer has always birthed another question. Why did he stop writing? Why did the murders suddenly end? Did he die, go to prison under another name, or simply decide that silence would be the final code no one could crack? Some investigators believe that the Zodiac may have been incarcerated for another crime, unable to continue his spree. Others think he was an intelligent narcissist who craved attention more than blood, and when his fame began to fade, he stepped away, satisfied that he had etched himself into eternity. The Zodiac's handwriting, bold and erratic, has been compared against thousands of samples over the decades. Some analysts notice subtle differences in pressure and style, signs that suggest multiple people might have contributed to the letters. Could the Zodiac have been more than one individual? A group working in sync, bound by ideology or thrill? It's a theory that refuses to die. What remains irrefutable is that his crimes reshaped law enforcement forever. The Zodiac case helped drive the evolution of criminal profiling and forensic linguistics. It forced agencies to collaborate across counties and pushed journalists to think critically about the balance between public information and the glorification of evil. He was, in a disturbing way, a teacher of fear, one whose lessons changed the way society perceived anonymity and media influence. One chilling thought often discussed among experts is how easily the Zodiac could exist in today's digital world. In an age of encrypted messaging and dark web anonymity, a modern Zodiac might not need paper or ink. His ciphers could spread through social media, coded within memes, songs, or even blockchain data. It's a haunting reminder that human curiosity, the same force that drives us to seek truth, can also become a weapon in the wrong hands. And yet, despite the darkness, there's something deeply human in the pursuit of the Zodiac's truth. Every code cracked, every theory tested, every conversation about him is really about our own refusal to surrender to the unknown. We chase the answers not just for justice, but for meaning. To remind ourselves that evil, no matter how intelligent or elusive, can never truly hide from the light of persistence. Today, the letters sit in archives, the stamps fading, the paper brittle. But the symbols, those strange crosshairs and cryptic patterns, still pulse with energy, still inviting anyone brave enough to look closer. Somewhere in that jumble of signs and words, the Zodiac's real identity might still be waiting. Maybe the next great breakthrough will come from a student, a computer scientist, or an AI trained to detect patterns invisible to human logic. Or maybe the truth will emerge from something simpler, a forgotten police report, an old fingerprint overlooked in 1969, or a DNA fragment resting quietly in a storage locker. Until that day, the case lives on, not as a horror story, but as a testament to humanity's endurance. The Zodiac believed his codes would keep him immortal. But perhaps the real immortality belongs to those who never stopped searching for the truth. Because in every cold case, there's a heartbeat, a rhythm of memory, grief, and determination that refuses to fade. And for the victims of the Zodiac, that rhythm still echoes through every investigator's desk light, every researcher's computer screen, every sleepless night spent decoding the undecodable. San Francisco has long since moved on, but on quiet nights, when the fog creeps in from the bay and the city's lights flicker, you can almost imagine those words etched in the mist. This is the Zodiac speaking. A reminder of the voice that haunted generations. But also, a reminder that no secret stays hidden forever. Every mystery leaves behind a voice. Some whisper, some scream, but all deserve to be heard. And as long as there are those willing to listen, the truth will keep moving closer, one clue at a time. This was the story of the Zodiac Killer, the man who tried to turn fear into a language, and the world that learned to read between his lines. Where every mystery deserves a voice, this is Mystery Files, Cold Case Investigations.